fear the world would not be the same. Some people laughed, some people cried, most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Indo scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu tried to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to persuade him, he takes on his multi-armed form and said, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all felt that way, one way or another. Alright, welcome everyone to the last edition of what I was doing here. Hold on. I shall move up just a tad, just in case. But welcome to my
second edition of Supervillains Explored. Now, if you are seeing this, then this is actually a second reload. My first one, it sounded like I was across the room and moved the mic too far from my mouth, a whole ton of stuff. But I could sit here and ramble on, but I'm not going to dawdle too long here. Now, the last video I talked about Shima Gorath, and I started with Marvel and I'm gonna end with DC, but first I'm gonna go for the first time, at least with me, to something other than Marvel and DC. I'm going to go to Image Comics universe and I'm going to pull out a supervillain from Spawn's universe. And of course, as you can tell by this picture, some of you may recognize this guy, some of you may not. In my opinion, this guy is one of the more obscure Spawn villains in the fact that he's kind of really not used all that much, if not at all, anymore. And no one really knows who he is, and that's kind of sad because he's actually a pretty cool villain. But today I will be talking about the cyborg mafia hitman Overt-Kill. Now, Overt-Kill started out as a young man named Nicholas Roca, I believe is how you pronounce it, and he was born a troublemaker in Palermo, Sicily. I will have to apologize in advance for those of you that are Italian and I'm completely just butchering this. I am not good at pronunciation, so if you feel that I've mispronounced something, which more than likely I have, please in the comments below just try to phonetically spell it so I can sound it out, because I'm not doing it purposely. But anyway, he started his life of crime at a young age, and when he had hit 13 years old, sorry I had to count there, when he was at the age of 13 years old, he was extorting protection money and was selling his talents as a quote-unquote leg breaker. And when he was 15, he caught the eye of one of the top organized crime bosses, which was Luke. I'm just gonna say Luke. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce the rest of his name. Luke Barteno. And Barteno took Roca under his wing and trained him to channel his strength and violence. In other words, he made him a mafia enforcer. And it was during his life with the mafia that he became one of the greatest assets and quickly became known to the community. However, during one of his many rampages, he had killed the son of rival mafia boss Vito Calogero. And
Enraged by this, he made plans to call a hit on Nicholas, and he called in favors from some of his friends in the Middle East, oil-rich Arabs, and he called for him to be ambushed. And the Arabics had decided Take two. Sorry about that, I got a little tongue-tied. Had him ambushed, and they basically massacred Roca and left him for dead, clinging desperately to life and just barely alive at that. He was found and brought back. However, while in Sicily on business, an up-and-coming mob boss from New York named Antonio Twistelli, or Twist, came from New York suggesting that they try to make a mafia super hitman, like they tried to do with Tremor, who was a failed experiment. So they tried the same experiment using Nicholas, and the experiment went beyond their expectations, and Nicholas's body and mind had embraced the fullness of the operation and experiment. And that night he became Overt-Kill. Now, Overt-Kill actually did not make his official debut in Spawn Comics until issue 6. So his first appearance that we see him is in Spawn number 6. And he became basically a cyborg with enhanced strength, enhanced durability, tons of almost like prototype government weapons, missile launchers, flamethrowers. He had like a thermal visioned eyeball. Basically, he was more man than machine. I would compare him to John Corbin, Metallo, in terms of, the whole cyborg aspect. But anyway, sorry about that, I got cut off. But anyway, the experiment worked, and he ended up becoming Overt-Kill, and his services ended up being loaned out for favors, and one such loan was to Twist, who brought him to New York City to try to eliminate Spawn. And during his time in America, he had found and attacked Spawn, and at that point, Al Simmons didn't really have the abilities that he has now. So this was by far the toughest fight that Al had ever had in his life. And were it not for mechanical oversight with Overt-Kill, he would have actually had massacred Spawn. And he was one of the first people to actually beat up Spawn, or at least push Spawn beyond his limits. And it was in a later rematch that Spawn had actually defeated him using some of Jason Wynn's government weaponry. However, he was rebuilt and sent to defeat Spawn again. And he would once again be defeated by the Youngblood member Badrock. And then when he was hired to kill the Youngblood team, he was embarrassed and humiliated, and they wiped the floor with him. And he would then be reborn by his own flesh and blood brother, who rebuilt him, gave him newer, larger, and more dangerous weaponry and more cybernetics, and he took the name Overt War. And with his new body, he set out to go and defeat Spawn again. However, Spawn had become much more powerful this time, and without using any guns or anything, Spawn just decapitates him and then interrogates him, and once he got the information that he needed, he just basically tossed his head and left Overt-Kill to rot. And this was the last that we had heard of Nicholas in the Spawn comics. And I doubt very much that we may end up seeing Overt-Kill again because, not to bash on him, but Todd McFarlane is a very lazy comic book writer. And plus, everybody knows the Violator, everybody knows the Clown, everyone knows the Redeemer, Jason Wynn and all them. But Overt-Kill, out of all of Spawn's bad guys since, the first couple of comics, no one really knows about Overt-Kill unless you're like a Spawn fan like I've been since the very beginning. Now I'll admit, I am not the biggest Spawn fan, but I like Spawn. And I think Overt-Kill as a villain deserves to be recognized because he is one of the first villains that Al Simmons faced early on in his career as Spawn. But I also firmly believe that Overt-Kill deserves his recognition. He deserves everything that he should desire in terms of being a recognized villain. Now, I realized that that made no sense, and I was trying to be poetic there, but bottom line, Overt-Kill, one of the first guys to beat Spawn, definitely a villain that should not be overlooked. So, here you go. That's Overt-Kill. And look for my next one, which will be on a DC villain.